What if the greatest treasures of the ancient world aren't lost, just hidden? The Dead Sea Copper Scroll lists 60 locations of unimaginable wealth, yet no one has searched for them. Why? Tonight, we'll uncover the politics of revelation and why some secrets remain buried. Imagine this, a vast archive of knowledge, reduced to ashes. The Library of Alexandria held scrolls from across the ancient world, containing ideas and discoveries that could have reshaped history. Yet it burned not once, but multiple times. Destruction leaving empty spaces where knowledge used to be. These weren't random accidents. Fires happen, but when they strike a library again and again, they start to look like choices. Think of history as a puzzle with missing pieces. We have fragments of what the library contained, titles of lost works, references in surviving texts. Some scrolls spoke of medicine that could have saved lives, or astronomy that might have changed how we see the stars. Others held philosophies too radical for their time. When the flames came, they didn't burn evenly. Certain texts vanished completely, while others survived. That pattern hints at something deeper than bad luck. Scholars have long debated who controlled the destruction. Was it the Roman soldiers who set fire to ships in the harbor, letting flames spread to the library? The Christian zealots who viewed pagan knowledge as a threat? Or the Caliph who allegedly ordered the burning of books that contradicted the Quran? Each theory points to the same truth. The library didn't just burn, it was pruned. The real question isn't who lit the fires, but who decided which ideas were worth preserving. Rulers and religious leaders understood that knowledge is power. Letting certain scrolls survive meant controlling how history would be written. The gaps in our understanding aren't accidents, they're the result of deliberate silence. Alexandria's fate teaches us how easily memory can be shaped. A single fire might be tragedy. Repeated destruction is policy. The library's ruins remind us that some truths are erased simply because they didn't serve those in charge. Meanwhile, another library faced a quieter demise. Pergamon's collection rivaled Alexandria's, yet its disappearance left fewer flames and more unanswered questions. A slow fade, rather than a dramatic burn, but no less calculated. The methods change, but the outcome stays the same. What if a library could vanish without a trace? Pergamon's story isn't about flames or sudden destruction. It's about something far more subtle: knowledge, dissolving like sand through fingers, piece by piece, until almost nothing remains. While Alexandria's destruction captures imaginations, Pergamon's disappearance reveals how easily history can be rewritten when no one is watching. This rival library once held 200,000 scrolls, a treasure trove to match Alexandria's own. Scholars flocked to its halls, drawn by its famed medical texts and philosophical works. The building itself was a marvel, perched on a hill with shelves carved into the walls and a grand reading room bathed in light. But unlike Alexandria, Pergamon's end wasn't dramatic. It was slow, quiet, and methodical, like a chess game where the pieces were removed one by one. Historians still debate what happened. Some say Rome absorbed its collections when Pergamon became part of the empire. Others whispered that Alexandria, its great rival, might have taken key texts before the rest were scattered. A few suggest deliberate suppression, certain ideas too dangerous to preserve. The evidence is frayed at the edges, like a parchment worn thin by time. We know the library existed. We know it vanished. The how and why remain just out of reach. The loss isn't just about numbers. Pergamon specialized in medicine, housing works by Galen and others who pioneered early surgical techniques. Its scrolls on herbal remedies and anatomy could have shifted medical knowledge centuries earlier. But without them, progress had to start over, rediscovering what had already been known. This wasn't just destruction, it was a reset button pressed on human understanding. The strangest part, Pergamon's disappearance wasn't an accident. Scrolls don't vanish on their own. They're misplaced, taken, or left to rot. Some were likely repurposed, scraped, clean, and rewritten. Their original words lost beneath new ones. Others may have been deliberately destroyed, because they contradicted the narratives of those in power. When knowledge becomes a threat, it doesn't always burn. Sometimes, it's just made to disappear. Pergamon's fate shows how easily history can be weaponized. Unlike Alexandria's fiery end, this was a silent erasure, no fanfare, no single villain, just a gradual unspooling of truth. It's a reminder that control isn't always about brute force. Sometimes, it's about patience, letting time do the work, allowing certain stories to fade until they're forgotten altogether. Across the world, another empire took suppression to new extremes, not through neglect, but with calculated, brutal precision. The Qin dynasty didn't just erase books, it erased the people who read them. Tonight, let's explore how an emperor rewrote history by fire and sword. In 213 BCE, Qin Shi Huang made a decision that would reshape China's past not by accident, but through calculated destruction. His order was clear: burn all books that challenged his rule, and bury alive the scholars who dared to preserve them. This wasn't chaos, it was a precise reshaping of memory, like a gardener pruning a tree to control exactly how it would grow. The scope was staggering. Every historical record not praising the Qin dynasty was targeted. Poetry, philosophy, and accounts of previous rulers all fed to the flames. Only practical texts were spared: manuals on farming, medicine, and engineering. Everything else carried risk. The emperor understood that ideas could be more dangerous than armies. By controlling knowledge, he controlled how future generations would see him. There's a chilling logic to it. Separate accounts describe pits filled with scholars, their voices silenced permanently. The burning wasn't indiscriminate. Certain texts were sought out more aggressively, those documenting rival philosophies or older dynasties' achievements. The goal wasn't just to destroy, but to replace. In the emptied space, new imperial histories were written, glorifying Qin's reign as inevitable. We'll never know the full extent of what was lost. Ancient records mention libraries worth of literature vanishing overnight. Some texts survived by chance, hidden in walls or buried in tombs. Others were preserved as faint echoes, quotations in surviving works that reference now lost originals. The burns were so thorough that later historians struggled to piece together China's earlier dynasties. Gaps in the records still puzzle scholars today. The purge set a pattern. For centuries after, Chinese rulers would repeat this tactic, curating history by controlling what could be read. The Qin method became a dark blueprint: erase first, write later. Even the emperor's own tomb reflects this obsession with control. Guarded by thousands of terracotta warriors, it remains unopened, preserving his version of eternity untouched. But the most unsettling part isn't the destruction itself, it's how effective it was. We remember Qin Shi Huang as China's unifier, not as the man who rewrote history to make it so. His version stuck. The fires didn't just burn paper, they burned competing narratives, leaving only his story standing. That's the true power of controlling memory. Not just to hide the past, but to redesign it. Meanwhile, Buddhist monks faced their own crisis of preservation. While China's emperors burned books, these monks did the opposite, carrying sacred texts across mountains, risking everything to keep knowledge alive. Their story isn't about destruction, but rescue. As invasions threatened India's monasteries, they became guardians of words, smuggling manuscripts to safety page by page. Imagine this: monks fleeing through mountain passes, their robes heavy with scriptures, as invaders torched the great Buddhist libraries behind them. This wasn't a single moment of loss, but a slow scattering of knowledge across the Himalayas, like seeds carried by the wind, taking root in hidden valleys and remote caves. For centuries, India's monasteries had been the keepers of vast collections, teachings on meditation, medicine, and metaphysics painstakingly copied onto palm leaves and silk. Then, between the 12th and 13th centuries, wave after wave of destruction forced guardians of these texts to make impossible choices: leave them to burn, or risk everything to save them. The surviving records tell a fractured story. Some monks buried texts in clay jars, sealing them in caves where dry mountain air might preserve them. Others carried bundles of manuscripts over perilous trails into Tibet, Nepal, and Bhutan. The journey itself became a form of triage. What could be saved was often determined by weight and durability. Heavy metal-bound volumes were left behind, while lighter scrolls survived. This explains why later rediscoveries, like the Dunhuang manuscripts found sealed in a cave for nearly 1,000 years, contain such fragmented knowledge. They're not a library, but a collection of what could be carried. What's missing is just as telling. The oldest surviving Buddhist texts are rarely originals. They're copies of copies, often translated through multiple languages. Chinese and Tibetan versions from later centuries frequently contradict each other, suggesting edits, omissions, or simple errors introduced during the chaotic rescues. Some teachings attributed to the Buddha himself only appear in these later texts, raising quiet questions: were these additions or discoveries of lost originals? Without the Indian source material, we may never know. Modern scholars face a peculiar challenge. The texts that survived did so through accidents of geography and politics. Himalayan kingdoms protected some, traders smuggled others along silk routes. This means what we consider Buddhist canon is skewed toward what was valued by those specific communities. Entire schools of early Buddhist thought may have vanished simply because their manuscripts were stored in vulnerable lowland monasteries. Even the Pali Canon, the most complete early collection, exists today because it reached Sri Lankan islands spared the worst of the continental destruction. The most haunting absences are the mundane ones. Lost are the marginal notes, the commentaries scratched between lines by generations of monks, the debates once preserved in administrative records. These everyday traces would have revealed how teachings evolved, how ideas traveled, how ordinary practitioners interpreted wisdom. Instead, we have mostly the polished final products, the equivalent of studying Shakespeare without any drafts or letters. Yet the most important loss isn't a specific text, but context. Buddhist philosophy developed through dialogue, with teachers challenging students and rival schools honing ideas against each other. The gaps in the record make it harder to track these intellectual currents, like trying to reconstruct a conversation when half the speakers have been muted. Today's understandings of karma, emptiness, and enlightenment are built on a foundation with missing bricks. Across the ocean, another culture faced a similar fate, but where Buddhist texts vanished through fire and flight, Maya codices met destruction by the hands of those who claimed to preserve knowledge, a deliberate act of obliteration disguised as salvation. A Spanish bishop would proudly document his own role in burning thousands of native books, leaving behind just 4 survivors as grim proof of what was lost. What if the record of a civilization was destroyed by the very person documenting it? In 1562, Bishop Diego de Landa oversaw the burning of thousands of Maya codices in the Self. The act itself took only hours. The cultural loss spanned centuries. Yet the greatest irony lies in how we know about it. De Landa meticulously recorded his own destruction in his later writings. Like a thief leaving a receipt, he documented his crimes even as he committed them. The scale was staggering. Mayan scribes had produced folding screen books made of bark paper, coated with lime wash and painted with vivid glyphs. These codices contained astronomical calculations, medical knowledge, and historical records stretching back generations. De Landa called them lies of the devil, as they fed the flames. Only 4 survived the purges, all later taken to Europe as curiosities. Today, they sit in museums, fragments of what was once a vast written tradition. We know just enough to grasp what's missing. The surviving Dresden Codex contains precise Venus tables, accurate to 1 day in 500 years. The Madrid Codex shows ritual calendars spanning 52-year cycles. These surviving pages hint at the sophistication of what was lost. Spanish accounts describe books filled with star charts, herbal remedies, and records of dynasties stretching back before Christ. One soldier wrote of watching smoke rise for days as knowledge dissolved into ash. The destruction followed a pattern. First, the Spanish demanded books be handed over under threat of torture. Then, they staged public burnings as performances of power. Finally, they rewrote history in their own terms. De Landa himself exemplifies this twist. After burning the codices, he wrote his own account of Maya culture, becoming one of our primary sources about the people whose records he erased. His descriptions of their calendar and religion are now key texts, even as he destroyed the originals. What makes this loss particularly haunting is its precision. The Spanish didn't burn random texts, they targeted the most sacred and scientific works. Astronomical tables were prioritized for destruction, likely because they anchored Mayan religion. Medical texts disappeared, severing connections to herbal knowledge. Historical records burned fastest of all, cutting ties to pre-colonial identities. This wasn't blind fanaticism, was calculated unwriting of a civilization. Modern scholars face a peculiar challenge. The surviving codices are read through European lenses, interpreted by conquerors' frameworks. Without the full corpus, we can't know how distorted our understanding is. For example, the Dresden Codex's famous Venus tables may represent just one school of astronomy. What if other codices held competing systems? The Madrid Codex shows hunting rituals, but what ceremonies filled the lost books? The gaps shape our perceptions as much as the survivals. The most telling absence isn't any single fact, but context. Maya writing was intimately tied to performance glyphs, were meant to be chanted aloud, with specific rhythms. The burnings didn't just destroy information, they silenced ways of knowing. Modern reconstructions of Mayan pronunciation rely on guesswork. Certain glyphs remain untranslatable because all their examples burned. The language itself became fragmentary, like a song missing half its notes. This wasn't just book burning, it was memory restructuring. By destroying codices but preserving select oral traditions, the Spanish reshaped Maya identity to fit colonial molds. Stories that aligned with Christian themes survived, others vanished. The 4 surviving codices likely endured precisely because they seemed harmless pretty artifacts rather than threatening knowledge. Their survival wasn't luck, but curation by the very forces that destroyed the rest. Some texts, however, faced different fates, not burned, but buried, not destroyed, but deliberately hidden. While the Maya lost their books to fire, early Christian heretics sealed their forbidden Gospels in jars, burying them in deserts to wait for safer times. Their story isn't about destruction, but temporary surrender, trusting that Earth could preserve what humans would not. Tonight, let's uncover a text that was erased from early Christian canon. The Book of Enoch reads like Scripture, quotes like Scripture, and was once treated as Scripture, and suddenly, it wasn't. For centuries, this ancient text circulated freely among early Christian communities, referenced in the New Testament itself. Then, by the 4th century, it vanished from approved lists, surviving only in whispers and fragments. Like a banned book challenging state authority, Enoch's radical visions threatened the shaping orthodoxy. Its disappearance wasn't accidental, it was a quiet excision from the official story. The text's content explains why. Enoch describes a celestial rebellion, fallen angels teaching forbidden arts to humanity, and elaborate visions of heaven's architecture. These ideas resonated with early Christians but became problematic as church leaders worked to standardize doctrine. The concepts were too vivid, too specific, they didn't fit neatly into developing theological frameworks. Worse, Enoch's portrayal of divine judgment lacked the careful balance church fathers sought. Like an unregulated spark in dry tinder, its ideas risked igniting unapproved interpretations. Consider the timing. Enoch was excluded precisely when church councils were defining biblical canon. Authorities sought texts that reinforced unity, not diversity of belief. Enoch's celestial hierarchies and apocryphal revelations clashed with this push for cohesion. The decision wasn't about truth, but control, a calculated choice to remove material that could inspire competing narratives. Some scholars argue that Enoch's angelology, in particular, posed risks, as it described intermediaries between God and humanity that didn't align with emerging Christological views. The suppression worked almost perfectly. For over 1,000 years, the full text survived only in Ethiopia, preserved by the isolated Coptic Church. Elsewhere, fragments hid in plain sight, quotations in early Christian writings, veiled references in art and liturgy. Medieval scholars occasionally stumbled upon references, sparking quiet curiosity, but the complete work remained elusive. Even when Renaissance humanists recovered portions, the Church dismissed them as curiosities, not lost scripture. Rediscovery came slowly. In the 18th century, Scottish explorer James Bruce brought 3 Ethiopian copies back to Europe. Scholars immediately noticed alarming parallels between Enoch's visions and sections of the New Testament, particularly Jude's epistle. Entire passages matched almost word for word. This raised uncomfortable questions if Enoch was quoted as authoritative scripture by New Testament writers. Why had later generations rejected it? The answers point less to theology than to politics, to the consolidation of institutional power. The most revealing absences are what Enoch contains that canonical texts avoid. Detailed accounts of pre-flood civilizations, descriptions of astronomical phenomena tied to angelic movements, a cosmic clockwork where human actions trigger celestial responses. These ideas don't contradict mainstream doctrine so much as expand it into directions early church leaders may have deemed unnecessary or destabilizing. Like a tree with too many branches, Enoch threatened to grow beyond carefully pruned orthodox shapes. Modern readers encounter eerie familiarity in its pages. Concepts like the Son of Man, divine judgment, and resurrection appear in forms both recognizable and strangely alien. Some passages read like alternate versions of biblical stories, as if 2 scribes recorded the same event with different emphases. This isn't heresy, it's suppressed diversity, a reminder that early Christianity contained multitudes before institutional pressures narrowed the range of acceptable belief. What makes Enoch's disappearance most haunting isn't the loss itself, but what its survival reveals. The Ethiopian Church never stopped treating it as scripture. Their version of biblical history includes angels more prominently, judgment more imminent, and humanity's place more precarious. This parallel tradition suggests how differently Christianity might have developed had Enoch remained central rather than exiled. The book's fate exemplifies how faith communities don't just preserve truth, they curate it, selecting what aligns with institutional needs. Other texts faced even harsher suppression. While Enoch was quietly set aside, Gnostic Gospels were actively hunted, condemned as forgeries, and burned where found. Their story isn't one of gradual forgetting, but violent erasure. Secret texts buried in jars, hidden in desert caves, waiting centuries for safer times to emerge. Imagine this: a peasant digging for fertilizer near the Nile in 1945 uncovers a sealed jar. Inside aren't seeds or oil, but crumbling papyrus pages preserving radical visions of Christianity, buried for 16 centuries. The Nag Hammadi Library wasn't just a collection of texts, it was a time capsule of forbidden beliefs, hidden by Gnostic Christians as their writings were hunted and burned. These weren't marginal notes or heresies, but entire Gospels claiming equal authority to those in the New Testament. Like a shadow Bible, they offered startlingly different answers to life's great questions. Why were these texts so dangerous? The Gnostic Gospels presented salvation not through faith alone, but through secret knowledge, gnosis in Greek. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, "Know what is in front of your face, and what is hidden from you will be revealed." The Gospel of Philip describes baptism as a mystical marriage. Most radical of all, the Gospel of Truth suggests the material world itself is a mistake, a prison from which souls must awaken. These ideas clash directly with the emerging Orthodox view of a structured church offering the only path to redemption. The Church's response was systematic. By the 4th century, bishops like Irenaeus were compiling lists of approved texts, labeling all others as forgeries. Gnostic writings were rejected, not for historical inaccuracy, many were just as old as canonical Gospels, but for theological incompatibility. A line in Irenaeus' Against Heresies reveals the mindset. Error is never set forth in its naked deformity. The concern wasn't falsehood, but influence. Texts were burned not because they lied, but because they might convince. What survived did so through extraordinary measures. The Nag Hammadi codices were likely buried by monks from a nearby monastery, as Roman authorities intensified persecutions. The jars sealed preserved 52 texts across 13 leather-bound books. This accidental archive revealed a Christianity more diverse than most imagine, one where salvation could be achieved through introspection, where divine sparks slept within all people, where Mary Magdalene was called the disciple whom Jesus loved. These weren't fringe ideas in the early centuries of Christianity, but competing mainstream views. The suppression's effectiveness becomes clear when comparing textual survivals. While thousands of copies exist of canonical Gospels, many Gnostic texts are known from single copies. The tripartite tractate, a complex cosmological narrative, exists solely in the Nag Hammadi find. Without that one copy, we'd have no idea such an elaborate alternative Christian theology existed. Historians estimate the recovered texts represent a fraction of what was lost, like piecing together Shakespeare's works from a single surviving play. Most startling are the absences these texts fill. The Gospel of Thomas contains sayings of Jesus absent from the New Testament, some with clear parallels to Buddhist and Stoic thought. The Apocryphon of John rewrites Genesis' creation story, portraying the serpent as a liberator rather than a deceiver. These weren't minor variations, but fundamentally different worldviews, sharing the Christian label. Their survival forces us to ask, how might Christianity have developed if these voices hadn't been silenced? The burial itself tells a story. These weren't hastily hidden scrolls, but carefully preserved codices wrapped in leather. The monks who concealed them clearly hoped for future rediscovery, like planting seeds in winter for a spring that wouldn't come for 1,600 years. Their precautions worked almost too well. When finally uncovered, the text's Coptic script and unfamiliar concepts baffled initial scholars. It took decades before their significance was understood. What makes the Gnostic suppression unique is its two-stage erasure. First, Physical texts were destroyed or hidden. Then, their very existence was scrubbed from history. Church fathers wrote extensively against Gnosticism, but rarely quoted its texts directly, making the Nag Hammadi find like recovering the defendant. There's testimony in a trial where we only heard the prosecution. Suddenly, ideas condemned as incoherent or absurd emerged as sophisticated philosophical systems. Some secrets, however, were never meant to be found. The Gnostic texts had the advantage of being buried far from church centers. Other ancient archives faced the opposite problem there, not hidden, but locked away, their contents known but inaccessible. Babylon's royal libraries once held thousands of clay tablets recording everything from astronomy to dream interpretations. Today, many remain untranslated in museum basements, or worse, lost in private collections where scholars can't study them. The greatest cover-ups may still be ahead of us. What if ancient tablets were found but kept from public view? Babylon's royal library once held thousands of clay tablets, chronicles of kings, astronomical records, medical texts, and even early mathematical theories. Modern excavations have recovered some, but others remain curiously absent. The gaps in collections aren't random. Like a curtain drawn over a stage, certain truths stay hidden, visible only in glimpses when tablets resurface unexpectedly. Archaeologists have noticed inconsistencies. A tablet describing advanced astronomy might appear in a museum, while its companion text, the one explaining its calculations, remains missing. Private collectors occasionally auction Babylonian artifacts, but scholars rarely get access before they vanish again into anonymous holdings. Even in museums, some tablets sit in storage for decades, untranslated and unstudied. The delay isn't always negligence. Some argue it's strategic, a way to control which pieces of the past enter public knowledge. Consider the fate of the Babylonian astronomical diaries. These records tracked planetary movements for centuries with astonishing precision. Modern researchers have reconstructed parts of this system, but key tablets are still unaccounted for. Some surfaced briefly in antiquities markets before disappearing into private hands. Others were reportedly seen in archives but never fully documented. The effect is a fragmented understanding. We know the Babylonians could predict eclipses, but not always how they did it. The most revealing absences involve politics. Tablets detailing rebellions or unpopular rulers are disproportionately rare. Conquests get lavish documentation, defeats become footnotes. This isn't just ancient propaganda. Modern institutions sometimes perpetuate the filter. Museums highlight certain tablet-strayed records, royal decrees, while downplaying others that might challenge established narratives. Like a puzzle with half the pieces locked away, the picture we see depends on who holds the keys. Financial motives also play a role. The black market for Mesopotamian artifacts thrives on scarcity. A single tablet can sell for millions, creating incentives to keep some texts out of academic circulation. Wealthy collectors prize exclusivity, not scholarship. This means the rarest tablets, those that could rewrite history, are often the least likely to be studied. Scholars rely on smuggler photographs or hastily made copies, working with shadows of the real thing. The silence extends to translations. Even when tablets are available, their contents may not be. Ancient languages, like Akkadian, require specialists to decode, and funding for translation projects is limited. Many museums prioritize pieces that align with popular narratives, creation myths, famous kings, while leaving administrative records or dissenting voices untouched. The result is a curated past, where only certain voices get amplified. Some argue this is inevitable. Not everything can be preserved or studied at once, but the pattern is too consistent to dismiss. Texts that challenge modern assumptions about early science, politics, or religion face the longest delays. Astronomical tablets confirming Babylon's advanced math take decades to publish. Records of priestly disputes languish in back. Like a library where certain books are always checked out, the archive feels selectively censored. The greatest loss isn't any single fact, but context. Babylonian knowledge was interconnected: astronomy tied to religion, medicine to magic. Without the full corpus, we see threads but miss the tapestry. Late discoveries have appended assumptions before. A single tablet found in the 1990s revealed Babylonians understood Pythagorean theorem centuries before Pythagoras. What else might emerge if all the pieces were available? This isn't just about ancient history. The control of Babylonian tablets sets a precedent. It shows how easily access to the past can be shaped by modern interests, academic, financial, or political. The library's fate reminds us that preservation isn't neutral. Every choice about what to study, translate, or display pushes history in a particular direction. Another scroll lists treasures no one will search for. While Babylon's tablets wait in storage, the Dead Sea Copper Scroll sits in a museum, its list of hidden gold and silver untouched. Authorities have reasons to leave it unverified. Excavation would mean confronting questions of ownership, historical claims, even modern conflicts. Some truths remain buried because digging them up would cost too much. Tonight, let's explore a scroll that lists hidden hoards no one will excavate. Found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1952. The Copper Scroll differs from the others. It isn't written on parchment, but engraved on thin sheets of copper. Its contents aren't religious texts, but a straightforward inventory. 64 locations where treasures of gold, silver, and precious artifacts might be buried. The amounts are staggering: tons of silver, hundreds of gold bars, and even priestly vestments. Yet unlike most archaeological puzzles, this one hasn't sparked a rush to dig. The scroll sits in a museum, its clues untouched, its treasures likely still underground. What makes the Copper Scroll unique is its specificity. It reads like a straightforward treasure map. In the fortress of the Valley of Ica, buried at 40 cubits under the stairs, 65 bars of gold. The language is practical, not poetic. There's no mythology or metaphor, just distances, landmarks, and quantities. This should make verification simple. Yet no systematic excavations have been attempted. Unlike Indiana Jones-style quests, real archaeology moves slowly, constrained by politics, funding, and access. The scroll's sites span modern Israel, the West Bank, and Jordan, areas where digging is complicated by ownership disputes and preservation laws. Governments have reasons to hesitate. Verified discoveries could ignite legal battles over cultural heritage. Some sites may lie beneath modern towns or religious structures. Others could be booby-trapped into engineers, often designed tombs to collapse if disturbed. The scroll's source adds another layer. While most Dead Sea Scrolls were written by the Essenes, this one may come from the Jewish temple before its destruction in 70 CE, if true. The treasures could be sacred artifacts from Jerusalem's Second Temple, making their excavation even more sensitive. Authorities weigh these factors against scholarly curiosity, often choosing silence over potential conflict. The scroll's survival suggests how much we still don't know. Copper was rare and expensive. Who commissioned such a permanent record? Some scholars argue the treasure never existed, that the scroll is symbolic or fictional. Others believe it documents real wealth, possibly from the temple, hidden before the Roman siege. The most tantalizing theory suggests some treasures were recovered long ago, explaining why early searches turned up empty. Without digging, we can't confirm. The scroll remains suspended between history and legend, its truth neither proved nor disproved. Modern technology could solve the mystery. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging can detect underground anomalies without excavation. Yet these tools are rarely deployed for the scroll's sites. Funding goes to less contentious digs, where discoveries won't spark diplomatic incidents. This creates an odd paradox. We have a detailed ancient inventory, but lack the will to check it. Like a locked safe with the combination visible, the barrier isn't knowledge, but permission. The Copper Scroll embodies a pattern seen throughout history: controlled disclosure. Some truths remain buried because unearthing them would cost more than leaving them hidden. Whether by accident or design, humanity often preserves ignorance as carefully as knowledge. The scroll-less fate asks us to consider how much of history's puzzle remains incomplete, not because we can find the pieces, but because we choose not to look. Beneath the pyramids, another mystery awaits. While the Copper Scroll lists treasures that may never be sought, Egypt's Giza Plateau holds chambers deliberately kept off limits. Radar scans reveal hollow spaces under the Sphinx and unexplored passageways in the Great Pyramid. Yet official excavations stall, and permits are denied. Like the scroll's untouched sites, these gaps in exploration aren't accidents, they're choices. Behind every "no further access" sign lies a calculation about what truths are worth uncovering and which are better left buried. Imagine this: beneath the Great Pyramids, weathered stones, hidden chambers wait in silence. Since the late 1990s, radar scans have revealed a network of unexplored passages and cavities under Giza's ancient structures. Yet access to these spaces remains tightly restricted. Like doors locked from the inside, these areas hold secrets that modern researchers can detect but not document. The Egyptian authorities control excavations with deliberate care, granting few permits for deeper investigation. What lies beneath isn't just hidden, it's deliberately kept that way. The evidence is compelling but fragmentary. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have identified anomalies beneath the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid that don't match known structures. Some voids appear large enough to walk through, stretching dozens of meters. Thermal scans show temperature variations, suggesting hollow spaces. These aren't cracks or natural formations, the patterns are geometric, intentional. Yet when researchers request access, red tape stalls progress. Official responses cite preservation concerns, but the consistency raises questions. Why protect ruins from being understood? Historically, the pyramid's interior has yielded surprises whenever new areas were opened. The discovery of the so-called air shafts in the King's chamber forced scholars to rethink the structure's purpose. The unearthing of a hidden doorway in the Great Pyramid in 2002 revealed a small chamber empty, yet proof that even well-studied areas hold unknowns. Each breakthrough came after years of negotiation, suggesting that today's detected voids could rewrite history if explored. The resistance to do so implies calculated control over what narratives emerge. The tension lies between preservation and revelation. Authorities argue that invasive digs could damage fragile sites. Yet critics note that the same institutions approve lucrative tourist developments nearby. The real concern may be ideological. Giza's underground structures could challenge established theories about the pyramid's construction or purpose. Finds might contradict Egyptology's timelines or reveal connections to older, lost civilizations. Like a museum displaying only select artifacts, the current approach filters which truths enter public awareness. Technically, the tools exist to explore non-invasively. Miniature robotic cameras could navigate narrow passages. LiDAR and advanced sonar could map chambers without excavation. Yet these methods are rarely deployed at full scale. Funding flows to less controversial projects, those that confirm rather than challenge. The result is an academic limbo, where potential discoveries remain theoretical. Researchers publish papers about possible chambers, but without physical access, the theories can't be tested. The truth becomes a shadow, visible but intangible. The most telling pattern isn't what's found, but what isn't. Early 20th century excavations under the Sphinx were abruptly halted, their findings never fully published. Modern requests to resume the work meet vague rejections. Meanwhile, unauthorized explorations by fringe researchers often poorly documented fuel conspiracy theories, making serious studies seem risky by association. The cycle reinforces itself. Lack of access breeds speculation, which justifies further restriction. Knowledge becomes a commodity, released only when it serves the right interests. Giza's hidden spaces remind us that archaeology isn't just about discovery, it's about permission. The stones may whisper secrets, but someone decides when we're allowed to listen. This isn't unique to Egypt. Around the world, from Turkey to Peru, similar patterns emerge. Tantalizing scans followed by bureaucratic walls. The message is clear: some chapters of history remain unpublished until the keepers of the past deem it time. Some discoveries are paused before they can challenge history. Earlier this year, sonar scans in South America revealed vast subterranean networks predating the Inca, but permits for excavation were denied. The reason given: protecting the sites. The pattern repeats: technologies exposed hidden truths, but human decisions keep them buried. Like a play with missing acts, our understanding of the past depends on which scenes we're shown, and which remain behind the curtain. Across Bolivia's highlands, new scans suggest cities older than records, yet digging is delayed, assigned to future teams, whose future no one can say. The Earth keeps its secrets a little longer. What if an underwater city was found, then ignored? Deep beneath Lake Titicaca's shimmering surface, sonar scans revealed something unexpected: submerged stone structures arranged in geometric patterns. The discovery in 2000 should have sparked immediate exploration. Instead, like a story cut short, research stalled after preliminary dives. Funding dried up. Official reports mentioned anomalies, rather than ruins. The complex, potentially older than the Inca, remains unexcavated to this day. The scans showed clear formations, walls, terraces, and what appeared to be a temple platform. Underwater cameras captured carved stones resting on the lakebed. Local Aymara communities, long custodians of Titicaca's secrets, welcomed further investigation. Fishermen shared legends of a drowned city called Wainaku. Everything pointed to a major discovery. Yet within 2 years, the international team disbanded. Equipment was packed away. The findings, never formally published, became academic whispers. The explanations offered raised questions. Researchers cited high costs and technical challenges. The site lies under 400 feet of water, but other deepwater projects secure funding regularly. Some speculated about political sensitivities. The lake straddles Peru and Bolivia. Ownership of any discoveries could spark disputes. A few quietly pointed to tourism concerns. How would a pre-Inca underwater city affect existing historical narratives? Like a book with pages glued together, the truth remains unreadable by design. What makes this abandonment notable is its context. Lake Titicaca's shores are studded with ruins Tiwanaku, Puma, Punku, islands lined with ancient stonework. The lake itself was sacred to cultures spanning millennia. Fishermen still pull up artifacts in their net, ceramics, gold figurines, even stone anchors. The submerged structures fit logically into this landscape. Their neglect defies archaeological norms. Normally, such promising sites triggered decades of study. Here, the opposite occurred. Initial excitement gave way to silence. The lost opportunity extends beyond buildings. Lake sediment holds climate records spanning 25,000 years. The ruins could reveal how ancient civilizations adapted to changing water levels, knowledge relevant to modern climate challenges. Local communities hoped excavations might revive traditional skills like stonework and weaving. Instead, the structures remained frozen in limbo, acknowledged but unexplored, like a gift left unopened. The most telling detail emerges from project records. Early divers reported seeing ceramic fragments near the structures, some bearing markings unlike known Andean styles. Photos exist but haven't been widely analyzed. Without dating these artifacts, we can't place the site in history. It might predate Tiwanaku by thousands of years, or it could reframe our understanding of Inca expansion. The data sits in university archives, awaiting someone willing to ask uncomfortable questions. Lake Titicaca's mystery follows a pattern seen worldwide, from the Black Sea's flooded Bronze Age settlements to Japan's Yonaguni formations. Underwater discoveries often face delays and skepticism. Land archaeology dominates budgets and attention. Underwater sites require special equipment and training. But the deeper issue is psychological. We distrust what we can't walk through. Submerged ruins challenge our mental maps of ancient trade routes and migrations. They suggest civilizations may have risen and fallen before written history began. The lake's silence speaks volumes about how history gets written. Funding flows to projects that reinforce existing timelines. Disruptive finds wait longer for recognitions, sometimes indefinitely. Local knowledge is often sidelined. The Aymara's Wainaku stories matched the sonar images closely, yet received little scholarly follow-up. Like a puzzle missing half its pieces, our view of the past depends on which fragments we deem worth examining. Some artifacts are too controversial to display. While Titicaca's ruins languish underwater, museums worldwide grapple with objects that don't fit established narratives. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek gear device, was initially dismissed as too complex for its era. The Baghdad battery confounds historians with its possible electroplating function. These anomalies share a fate. Displayed as curiosities rather than game changers, their implications softened by explanatory plaques. The truth may be simpler. We protect our timelines more carefully than our treasures. Tonight, let's examine objects that don't fit our historical timeline. Some artifacts resist easy classification, challenging the stories we tell about the past. The Antikythera mechanism, pulled from a shipwreck in 1901, is one such enigma. This intricate bronze device, with its precise gear, trains and dials, resembles a mechanical computer. Yet it dates to around 100 BCE, centuries before comparable technology was thought to exist. Museums display it, but labels often soften its implications. The message is clear. Acknowledge the object, but don't let it disrupt the narrative. The pattern repeats globally. In Baghdad's National Museum rests a clay jar housing an iron rod, wrapped in copper dubbed the Baghdad Battery. When filled with acidic liquid, it generates a small electric charge. Dated between 250 BCE and 250 CE, it predates known electrical experimentation by over a millennium. Officially, it's classified as a ritual vessel, like puzzle pieces from different boxes. These artifacts don't slot neatly into history as we've written it. What happens to such discoveries follows a script. First comes initial excitement, then careful reclassification. The London hammer, found embedded in 400-million-year-old rock in Texas, exhibits metallurgy to advance for its geological context. After brief scrutiny, it was labeled a modern tool and stored away. The Koso artifact, a spark plug encased in a geode, met similar fate, displayed briefly, then quietly archived. The process isn't conspiracy, but curatorial caution taken to extremes. Like a librarian shelving misfit books in the basement, institutions prioritize order over anomaly. The resistance comes from multiple directions. Academic careers are built on established chronologies. Funding flows to projects reinforcing dominant paradigms. Museums design exhibits for public comprehension, not intellectual upheaval. When faced with an object that contradicts textbooks, the path of least resistance is often to contextualize it into harmlessness. The Droper's stones, disc-like artifacts, with microscopic spiral grooves, were dismissed as Neolithic ritual objects, despite extraordinary claims about their origins. The truth becomes less important than maintaining a coherent story. Technology could settle many debates. Advanced dating methods and material analysis might confirm or debunk puzzling finds, yet such studies are rarely prioritized. The Tekaxic Calixtlahuca head, a Roman-looking artifact found in pre-Columbian Mexico, underwent thermoluminescence dating only decades after its discovery. Results placed it firmly in the classical period, but by then, the academic consensus had ossified around more conventional narratives. Like a trial without witnesses, the evidence arrives too late to sway the verdict. The silence isn't absolute. Independent researchers trumpet these anomalies as proof of lost civilizations or extraterrestrial contact. Their enthusiasm, though often lacks scholarly rigor, making it easy for mainstream science to dismiss the entire conversation. The middle ground, serious investigation without wild speculation, struggles for traction. Genuine mysteries get trapped between institutional inertia and fringe overreach. Consider what's at stake. If even one of these artifacts forces timeline revisions, it undermines trust in historical methods. The Antikythera mechanism alone required re-evaluating ancient Greek technological capacity. Beneath the academic caution lies an existential question. How much uncertainty can our understanding of the past tolerate? The answer seems to be very little. Like a house of cards, the structure holds only if every piece stays in its assigned place. The cumulative effect is a filtered history. Objects that reinforce current theories get studied and displayed. Those that don't are noted, then set aside. Visitors see the polished narrative, not the messy drafts. This isn't deception, it's the human impulse to make messy reality comprehensible. But it means we may be missing connections, influences, and entire chapters of human innovation. The artifacts whisper of possibilities we've systematically tuned out. Some skeletons were too large to acknowledge. While museums debate anomalous objects, another category of discovery faces even harsher skepticism. Human remains that don't match conventional timelines or physiologies. Newspaper archives from the 1800s and early 1900s describe giant skeletons unearthed across America, only to vanish from official records. Whether myth or lost truth, their treatment reveals how fiercely we guard the boundaries of accepted history. Imagine this: in the late 1800s, newspapers across America carried reports of giant skeletons unearthed from ancient burial mounds. The Wheeling Daily Register described a 7'6" skeleton found in West Virginia. The New York Times noted a 9-foot frame discovered in Wisconsin. The accounts were matter-of-fact, with measurements and witness names. Yet today, these remains are nowhere to be found. Like whispers fading in an empty room, the evidence has vanished. The Smithsonian Institution holds the largest collection of human remains in the world, over 30,000 specimens, yet it denies possessing any outsized skeletons. Officials say records show no such acquisitions, but former conservators tell different stories. In 2014, a Smithsonian insider alleged in a little-known interview that thousands of unusual skeletons were quietly destroyed in the early 1900s. The reason: they didn't fit prevailing theories about Native American history. The claim remains unverified, but the pattern is familiar problematic evidence, disappearing into institutional silence. Newspaper archives paint an odd picture. Between 1850 and 1950, hundreds of articles describe giant skeletons across 30 states. Many come from reputable local papers, not sensational tabloids. The Marietta Daily Leader detailed a burial chamber with 20 skeletons, all over 7 feet. In 1892, the Lompoc Record recorded 7'8" remains in California in 1912, like echoes of the same story. These reports share striking similarities, yet no museum today displays such specimens. The standard explanations strain credibility. Some academics suggest 19th century exaggeration claims that reporters added feet 2 inches. Others propose misidentified animal bones, but many accounts came from trained medical doctors measuring remains in situ. A few artifacts did survive: oversized stone tools in Iowa, giant jawbones in Tennessee hinting at what might have been, like finding luggage without passengers. These objects suggest something larger was here. Native American traditions complicate the picture. Multiple tribes have oral histories of stone giants or ancient ones. The Paiute speak of red-haired cannibal giants, called Sitk. The Choctaw tell of a race of giants exterminated by their ancestors. These stories predate European contact by centuries. They also align geographically with many skeleton reports. When an 8-foot skeleton surfaced in Nevada's Lovelock Cave in 1911, Paiute elders said it matched their legends. Science shrugged while tradition nodded. The most compelling questions aren't about bones, but behavior. Why would respected institutions deliberately destroy unique specimens? The answer lies in historical context. The late 1800s saw fierce academic battles over human origins. The dominant theory, then popular idea called race science, couldn't accommodate evidence of giant prehistoric Americans. Like pruning an unruly branch, inconvenient finds were quietly removed from the record. What makes this case unique is the paper trail. Unlike forgotten temples or burned libraries, the giant skeleton reports survived in print. Anyone can read the original articles in digitized archives. The disparity between these records and museum inventories forms a peculiar gap. It's not that evidence is missing, it's that it exists only in one form, not another. Like a photograph of a ghost, we have the image, but not the subject. Today, discussion of giant skeletons falls into two camps: true believers, who seek props, and skeptics, who dismiss all reports as hoaxes. The middle ground is barren. No mainstream institution funds new excavations at reported sites. No anthropological journal revisits old claims with modern dating methods. The topic itself became radioactive, ensuring few serious scholars would touch it. Like a conversation stopped mid-sentence, the dialogue froze in the 1950s. The deeper issue isn't giant skeletons, but how we handle anomalies. Science advances by confronting paradoxes, yet institutional inertia often resists. When the Smithsonian debunked one Ohio giant in 2007, tests showed it was an 1890s medical specimen, a valid correction. But this doesn't explain hundreds of other reports. Like cleaning one leaf while ignoring the forest, such efforts satisfy few. Some reports vanish without a trace. While debates rage over giant skeletons, another form of disappearance occurs: entire excavation records going missing. The phenomenon isn't rare. From Egypt to Illinois, field notes and catalogs from early digs have mysteriously disappeared from university archives. Unlike controversial skeletons, these vanishings inspire no conspiracy theories. They're quietly accepted as bureaucratic accidents. Yet the effect is the same: history loses another piece of itself. What if archaeological data disappeared into bureaucratic voids? Between the 1930s and 1950s, entire excavation records vanished from museum archives and university collections. Field notes, site sketches, artifact catalogs gone without explanation, like files deleted from a shared drive. These documents didn't just fade with time, they were actively misplaced or restricted. The British Museum's Iraq expedition records contain curious gaps from key digs at Ur and Nineveh. Cahokia Mound excavation reports from Illinois exist today as fragmentary carbon copies, the original typed versions, unaccounted for. The process follows a familiar rhythm. Researchers request historic fieldwork documents and receive polite dead ends. Archives claim materials were lost during relocation or never properly accessioned. Occasionally, partial records surfaced with entire sections redacted not for national security, but for unclear academic reasons. Like trying to read a book with chapters glued together, the information exists but remains inaccessible. Without original field notes, modern scholars can't verify early conclusions about layer dating or artifact placement. History becomes conditional based on second-hand accounts of lost evidence. Some disappearances trace to post-war chaos. World War II scattered European archaeological teams and their records. The Berlin Ethnological Museum's Near East collections suffered bomb damage, but some missing reports predate the Blitz. Other gaps suggest deliberate removal. The University of Chicago's Oriental Institute holds incomplete documentation from their 1930s Megiddo excavations, precisely the seasons that uncovered controversial finds. Like a selective amnesia, only certain excavations suffer such losses. Floods and fires, the usual culprits, don't explain this pattern. The implications ripple outward. Without primary records, dating assumptions go unchallenged. Stratigraphic relationships between artifacts become speculative. Take the Spiro Mounds in Oklahoma. 1930s Works Progress Administration dig yielded thousands of Mississippian artifacts, but missing field notes leave modern researchers guessing which objects came from which burial layers. Like a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, the picture stays incomplete by design. Funding priorities amplify the issue. Archives require staffing and space resources, often diverted to new excavations rather than preserving old records. Harvard's Peabody Museum houses boxes of uncatalogued expedition materials from early American digs. Volunteers slowly process them, discovering misfiled reports decades overdue for review. But the backlog grows faster than it shrinks. Like a library where books accumulate but aren't shelved. Knowledge exists in limbo, technically preserved, practically inaccessible. Occasionally, the system coughs up a surprise. In 2012, a graduate student found misplaced Cahokia sitemaps in a University of Wisconsin storage closet. The diagrams revealed mound construction phases previously unknown. Their disappearance hadn't been malicious, just bureaucratic neglect, but the effect was identical to suppression. Delayed understanding, like finding an old key after selling the house. The discovery came too late to matter. Modern archaeology combs through this patchwork past. Ground-penetrating radar can resurvey known sites, but can't recover original excavators' observations. Oral histories from retired archaeologists help fill gaps, but memory fades. The lost reports represent more than paper, their contexts, the subtle details that turn objects into evidence. A pot shard's meaning changes depending whether it lay in a kitchen, midden, or ceremonial pit. Without records, we're left with artifacts stripped of story. The quiet tragedy isn't conspiracy, but indifference. No single hand orchestrated these losses. Rather, a system that values discovery over documentation allowed knowledge to seep away. Like sand through fingers, the grains don't vanish all at once, just gradually, until you notice the pile is smaller. Archivists now digitize records preemptively, but the salvage operation races against decay and institutional memory loss. Compared to dramatic book burnings or library fires, this erosion leaves no ash, just empty shelves and unanswered questions. Yet the result mirrors deliberate suppression history, curated by accident rather than design. When records vanish, so does our ability to question past interpretations. The gatekeepers aren't villains, but time and negligence. Even medieval history was shaped by convenience. As scholars struggle with lost excavation data, earlier eras faced their own documentation puzzles, not from missing records, but from edited ones. Chronicles penned by monastic scribes often smoothed inconvenient truths to fit desired narratives. Like an editor pruning a manuscript, they crafted history that served present needs, leaving future generations to untangle fact from flattery. Tonight, let's see how history can be reshaped to fit modern ideals. Medieval chroniclers didn't just record events, they crafted them. Like a painter touching up an old portrait, monastic scribes adjusted dates and details to suit their patrons. A king's reign might be extended to cover gaps in authority. Battle losses became moral victories. The past became clay, molded to strengthen present power structures. Take the dating of medieval cathedrals. Many show curious alignments between foundation dates and royal anniversaries. Historians note how often coincidentally these constructions began on dates significant to ruling families. Original builders' records rarely survive, leaving only the polished official histories. Like a film edited after test screenings, the rough edges were smoothed away. What began as political convenience hardened into accepted fact over centuries. The process left subtle traces. Some chronicles reference older sources that no longer exist. Others contain odd jumps in timeline logic years that don't quite add up. At Winchester Cathedral, stonework analysis revealed older foundations beneath the official start date. The discrepancy was small, just a few decades, but telling, like finding erased pencil marks under ink. Physical evidence sometimes contradicts written records. Why would medieval institutions alter dates? The motives were often practical. A church might backdate its founding to claim older, more sacred origins. A noble family could adjust genealogies to secure land rights. These weren't forgeries in the criminal sense, but narrative enhancements, small edits that accumulated over generations. Like a rumor retold until it becomes fact, the changes stuck because they served someone's interests. The most revealing cases involve disappearing documents. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle exists today, in multiple versions, each with slight variations. Some entries match across copies, others diverge noticeably. Historians suspect political pressures shaped these differences, though the original notes are long lost. Without them, we can't know which version came first, only that we're seeing history through warped glass. Modern dating techniques expose some gaps. Dendrochronology dating with samples through tree rings has corrected many medieval timelines. A beam might prove a castle is younger than claimed, or a cathedral older, yet these corrections rarely make popular histories. Guidebooks still repeat the traditional dates, the prettiest story winning out over messy truth. Like a catchy tune that drowns out subtler music, the simpler narrative persists, the effects ripple outward. Art historians struggle to place manuscripts when creation dates are unreliable. Linguists tracking language evolution hit snags when texts can't be firmly dated. Even climate studies using medieval records must account for potential timeline distortions. Like a watch running slightly fast, these small inaccuracies throw off larger calculations. What makes medieval dating unique is its blend of intention and accident. Unlike deliberate destruction like China's book burning, this was subtler, a slow bending rather than breaking of truth. Chroniclers likely believed they were improving history, not falsifying it. Their edits came from loyalty, not deceit. Yet the result is equally transformative, a past shaped by hands much later than the events themselves. Nowhere is this clearer than in royal genealogies. Multiple European families traced lineages to biblical or mythical figures' connections. Modern genetics disprove. Yet these claims governed marriages, wars, and successions for centuries. The power of manipulated history lies not in its truth, but its acceptance. Like a play where everyone knows the script, but performs it anyway. The fiction became reality through collective belief. The deeper question isn't about specific inaccuracies, but how they shaped worldviews. When children learned history from these edited chronicles, they inherited political agendas along with facts. Crusades seemed more justified, kings more divinely ordained, enemies more villainous. Like tinted spectacles, these narratives colored how generations saw their world and their place in it. Yet hints of alternative stories survive. Folktales sometimes preserve versions of events absent from official records. Place names hold clues. A king's field might mark a battle the chronicles omit. Archaeology regularly unearths settlements that documents never mention. Like faint pencil marks beneath a painting, these traces suggest richer compositions beneath the surface. Even systematic chronicles can be altered. As we'll see next, China's Song dynasty historians didn't just record history, they rewrote it midway through, erasing figures and events that no longer served state interests. While medieval Europe softened awkward truths, imperial China wielded history like a chisel, actively reshaping the past to fit present needs. The methods differed, but the goal remained the same: control through controlled memory. Imagine this: historians rewriting their own past to secure legitimacy. The Song dynasty maintained 3 separate historical offices, each producing its own version of events. Like editors working on different drafts of the same novel, they shaped narratives to serve their imperial patrons. The official Song Shitha dynasty's historical recordant went multiple revisions between the northern and southern Song periods. Key figures disappeared from later editions. Controversial negotiations appeared shortened or softened. What began as record-keeping became reputation management on a grand scale. The editing left noticeable seams. Modern scholars analyzing the Song Shi noted abrupt shifts in tone between sections. Battles described in early chapters as costly stalemates become moral victories in later revisions. Opposition leaders who once merited detailed biographies are reduced to footnotes. Like a photograph retouched to remove unflattering elements, the historical image grew cleaner and less accurate with each pass. The motivations were practical. The southern Song needed to justify its retreat south after losing northern territories. Court historians obliged by reframing the withdrawal as strategic repositioning. Details about lost battles and failed alliances received less emphasis. Like a lawyer crafting a defense, they presented events in the most favorable light. The irony is, Rechaped dynasty, famed for its bureaucratic precision, became equally skilled at selective amnesia. Some alterations were blatant. The original memorials submitted to Emperor Taizong contained passages missing from later compilations. Entire memorials criticizing military campaigns vanished after his reign. Other changes were subtler, date adjusted here, a negotiation summarized rather than quoted there. Like slowly adjusting a painting's colors, the cumulative effect changed the entire composition without any obvious brushstrokes. The most revealing gaps involve foreign relations. Early accounts of Song Liu treaty negotiations show tense bargaining. Later versions present these as voluntary imperial generosity. A 1042 border agreement, originally described as hard-won compromise, becomes, in revised histories, a display of Song magnanimity. Diplomacy looks very different when only one side's edited records survive. Like watching a play where half the actors have left the stage, we're left guessing at the full performance. Editing wasn't limited to politics. Scientific achievements were also curated. Shen Kuo's groundbreaking work on magnetic declination appears in the Song Shi, but his criticisms of imperial policies don't. The message was clear: innovation earned recognition only when it served the state's image. Like pruning a tree to control its shape, inconvenient growths were carefully removed. These weren't crude forgeries. The historians worked within established conventions, using omission and emphasis rather than outright invention. A disapproved official might be mentioned without his controversial proposals. A military defeat could appear briefly, then get overshadowed by subsequent victories. Like a mosaic where some tiles were replaced, the overall picture remained familiar, just subtly altered. The effects extended beyond the court. Local gazetteers often followed the official history's lead. Temples and schools used approved versions of events. Over generations, the edited narrative became the only narrative. Like a whisper passed through many ears, the message simplified as it spread, losing nuance but gaining authority. Modern scholars face peculiar challenges when studying the Song. Some events are documented only in non-Song sources, hidden, Jurchen, or Korean records that didn't undergo the same polishing. These outsider accounts often contradict the official histories, like finding alternate endings to a familiar story. They remind us how much we might be missing. The greatest loss isn't specific facts, but perspective. By reading only the finished version, we miss the debates, doubts, and competing views that shaped decisions. History becomes monologue instead of dialogue. Like seeing a sculpture after the chisel marks were sanded away. We admire the smooth surface but lose the artist's process. Song historical methods set enduring patterns. Later dynasties adopted similar practices, culminating in the king's massive history projects. Each generation learned the same lesson: who controls the past controls the present. Like carefully tended gardens, their official histories grew what they were planted to grow. Some archives remain tightly controlled. While we piece together Song history from fragments, other repositories guard their secrets more jealously. None compares to the Vatican's archives, 90 kilometers of shelved documents, most unseen by the public. If Imperial China wrote history to serve the state, what narratives might emerge from records kept locked for centuries? The answer lies beyond reach, preserved but not shared, like a library with no open hours. What if nearly 90 kilometers of shelving held secrets you couldn't access? The Vatican Apostolic Archive spans underground bunkers and climate-controlled chambers, containing millennia of letters, ledgers, and manuscripts. yet its contents remain largely unseen. Unlike national archives open to public research, this repository operates on strict access rules. Scholars must apply months in advance, justifying each document request. Approved researchers then work under watchful eyes in a reading room where photography is forbidden and notes are checked upon. Exit like a vault where only certain safe combinations are shared. Knowledge here is preserved, but not freely given. The restrictions follow historical patterns. For centuries, the archive was called the Secret Vatican Archive, though officials now emphasize that secret once simply meant private, yet the old name hints at deeper truths. The Vatican didn't systematically organize its records for outside researchers until the late 19th century. Even now, documents are released gradually, often decades after events they reference. Papal correspondence from Pius XII's World War era only became partially available in 2020. Like a door unlocked inch by inch, access comes slowly, if at all. What might these shelves reveal? The archive holds everything from medieval papal bulls to Renaissance astronomical charts. Trial records from the Inquisition gathered dust alongside correspondence with emperors and explorers. Jesuit missionaries sent detailed accounts of encounters with indigenous cultures, reports that could reshape our understanding of colonial exchanges. Like a library where most books remain spine-out, we know the titles but not the contents. The Jesuit influence adds another layer. This order became early gatekeepers of education across Europe and beyond. Their schools used approved curricula. Their scholars penned influential texts. The archive likely holds records showing how knowledge was filtered for colonial subjects, indigenous converts, and European elites. Like gardeners tending different plots, they cultivated minds according to rigid plans, yet the planting manuals, the documents showing their methods, stay mostly archived. Some leaks tease what's withheld. The controversial Alto Adige papers surfaced briefly in the 1990s before being recalled. They reportedly detailed post-war Vatican negotiations about borders and populations. Other researcher notes mention finding unexpected connections, medieval maps with pre-Columbian knowledge, astronomical observations contradicting official histories. Like overhearing half a conversation, these fragments raise more questions than answers. The archive's physical layout mirrors its secrecy. Documents aren't organized chronologically or thematically, but by obscure cataloging systems. Researchers describe wandering maze-like corridors, relying on staff to fetch boxes from unseen storerooms. Like a puzzle missing its reference image, the structure itself obscures clear understanding. You can study what you're given, not what you suspect exists. Modern technology should theoretically increase access. Digitization projects have made some manuscripts available online, but these represent a tiny fraction. The bulk remains physical, requiring in-person visits and chaperoned handling. Like scanning every 10th page of a diary, the digital selections provide glimpses, not continuity. Full transparency would require different priorities. The Vatican isn't unique in restricting access. National archives worldwide have classified documents. What sets Rome apart is scale and timeframe. British records might stay sealed for decades. Vatican ones can wait centuries. The implications ripple through historical research. Studies on the Reformation, the Inquisition, or early astronomy rely heavily on sources the Vatican controls. Like trying to paint a landscape with half the colors missing, scholars work with limited palettes. The deeper issue isn't just hidden facts, but controlled narratives. When one institution holds disproportionate archival power, it shapes how history gets written. Biases become entrenched simply because alternate sources don't survive or aren't accessible. Like a play performed from one surviving script, we only hear certain voices. The restrictions have defenders. Archivists cite preservation needs. Some manuscripts are fragile. Others note that full openness could harm living individuals mentioned in personal letters. Valid concerns, yet they don't explain why 18th century land disputes or 17th century scientific correspondence remain restricted. Like security measures that far exceed the threats, the policies seem designed to discourage as much as protect. Occasionally, omissions become obvious. When a researcher finds reference to a document that then can't be located. When inventory lists mention files that don't appear in catalogs, like finding an empty frame where a painting should be, the absence tells its own story. The Vatican archive endures as the ultimate symbol of institutional memory control. More than China's edited histories or burned libraries, It represents ongoing, active gatekeeping. Knowledge here isn't lost to time or disaster, it's consciously managed. Like a gardener who knows exactly which seeds to plant and which to store away, the custodians shape what history grows. Even geometry has been stripped of meaning, while institutions control written records. Another form of knowledge has quietly disappeared from mainstream education: the sacred geometry once woven into cathedrals, temples, and ancient cities. These silent designs held meanings modern architects no longer recognize, like a language we've forgotten how to read. Tonight, let's explore how symbols once woven into architecture faded from curricula. Sacred geometry wasn't just decoration, it was a language. From Gothic cathedrals to Egyptian temples, buildings spoke through proportions and patterns. The golden ratio shaped Parthenon columns. Islamic mosaics encoded cosmic order. These designs carried meaning beyond aesthetics, linking earth to heavens. Yet today, we see only pretty shapes where ancestors saw sacred equations. Like a forgotten alphabet, the power in these forms has faded from common understanding. The shift happened gradually. Medieval masons apprenticed for years to learn sacred proportions. Renaissance architects like Brunelleschi studied ancient ruins, not just for style, but hidden mathematics. By the 19th century, industrial building methods prioritized speed over meaning. Geometry became calculation, not communion. Schools stopped teaching the symbolic weight behind structures. A cathedral's rose window became mere ornament, not a map of celestial harmony. Like losing the key to a cipher, we kept the images but not their significance. What exactly vanished? The knowledge that certain angles resonated with human perception, that Fibonacci sequences reflected growth patterns in nature, that harmonic ratios in ancient monuments often matched astronomical cycles. These weren't superstitions, they were observed relationships between form and effect. Modern studies confirm some acoustic properties in Gothic vaults or solar alignments in pyramids that builders clearly understood. Yet our textbooks reduce these to coincidences. Like calling a symphony random noise, we dismiss what we no longer comprehend. The loss isn't about nostalgia. Sacred geometry anchored cultures to larger truths. Native American medicine wheels aligned with solstices, Hindu temple layouts mirrored cosmic diagrams. These weren't arbitrary choices, they connected daily life to universal order. Remove that context, and structures become hollow shells. A mandala becomes just a pretty circle. A labyrinth loses its meditative power. Like reading poetry in a language you've forgotten, the form remains, but the feeling fades. Some traditions kept the knowledge alive. Master masons still pass down geometric secrets orally. Tibetan monks memorize intricate sand mandalas, but mainstream architecture and education abandoned the deeper lessons. The Bauhaus movement deliberately stripped ornamentation in favor of pure function. Engineering schools emphasized utility over symbolism. Like replacing handwritten letters with text messages, communication became efficient but thinner. The consequences ripple outward. Modern buildings often ignore biophilic design, principles that sacred geometry embodied. Studies show workers in geometrically harmonious spaces report higher well-being. Hospitals with nature-inspired patterns yield faster patient recovery. Our ancestors knew this intuitively. We're relearning it through science. Like discovering an old remedy that still works, we're confirming ancient insights with modern tools. Yet resistance remains. Mainstream academia often dismisses sacred geometry as pseudoscience. The split reflects a deeper divide between knowledge that can be measured and wisdom that must be felt. A cathedral's perfect acoustics can be analyzed with sound waves, but not the awe it inspires. Like trying to explain a sunrise with only wavelength data, something essential gets lost in translation. The most telling absence is in education. Few architecture programs require studying Chartres Cathedral-s labyrinth or the Great Mosque of Cordoba-s tilework as mathematical philosophy. Students learn to calculate loads, not contemplate why certain shapes feel right. Like teaching music theory without ever playing a note, the living connection atrophies. Graduates can build sturdy boxes, but not structures that sing. Sacred geometry's near erasure shows how knowledge is curated. What gets labeled essential learning reflects cultural priorities. We teach spreadsheet formulas but not the golden ratio, tax code complexities but not temple harmonies. The selection isn't neutral, it shapes how we see or don't see patterns in the world. Like wearing glasses that blur certain colors, We've been educated to miss certain truths. Perhaps the greatest loss is metaphysical. These geometries offered a bridge between visible and invisible ways to materialize abstract harmony. When we stop recognizing that language, the world flattens. Seasons become calendar entries, not cosmic rhythms. Buildings become shelters, not prayers in stone. Like ignoring the nutritional value of food while counting calories, we grasp fragments but miss the whole. Who holds the pen that writes history? Just as our architectural education changed, so too did our records of why it changed. The story of knowledge isn't just about discoveries, it's about selections, and those selections are never accidental. They reflect who decides what matters, what's useful, what's true. The quiet removal of sacred geometry from mainstream thought wasn't a natural evolution, but a choice, one of many that shape what we collectively remember and forget. History isn't just what happened, it's what survives. We've seen how fire, politics, and simple neglect shape our understanding of the past. From Alexandria's ashes to Vatican vaults, knowledge is curated by those who control it, yet fragments slip through. A buried manuscript, an anomalous artifact, a whispered legend. These gaps invite us to question, to wonder what else might be missing. The past isn't fixed, it's a conversation between what's remembered and what's lost. Consider what might still lie hidden, waiting to be found. If this journey through forgotten histories helped, subscribe for more soothing explorations of myth and memory.